Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection. Let's start with our prayer of surrender as always, and then move on to our devotion for today. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. All right. Today our devotion is the courage, challenge, charge, and choice to live authentically, part 1. Now, there's a few little clues that you can go by to know whether the devotion was written by me or my brother. If it's got a really short affirmation, I don't know how many of you were with us on yesterday morning, but I had to laugh because the affirmation was just so short and to the point. I was like, yep, this is my day. Because though, as I said, what I always did was I would write the body first, and then however many words I had left, that was what I would have to use for my affirmation. But so that's one of the things you can use to tell if I wrote a devotion. If there is a lot of alliteration, which means the same words that begin with the same letter in the title, it's usually my brother. He loves alliteration. So this is one of my brother's day, the courage, challenge, charge, and choice to live authentically, part 1. And we will be getting part 2 tomorrow night when he speaks. Okay. Our affirmation is, today I will awaken the courage, accept the challenge, receive the charge, and make the choice to be my true, authentic self, no matter how many people it upsets. All right. So it says, how many of us have made the choice to live inauthentically at one time or another? Is there any nuance between selling out and being all things to all people, as it says in 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23? And where is the line of demarcation? What is the impact if and when you grew tired of the facade? There are people who consciously practice being authentic. There are people who consciously choose to be disingenuous. Then there are the rest of us who are authentic on some days and not so authentic on other days. It's the middle way, right? The prospect of living in perfect authenticity can make us feel both hopeful and fearful. Hopeful because being real is craveable, valuable. Fearful because living authentically can be a huge undertaking, shifting, shaking, and even shattering what we have accepted as our norm. Let's take one bite of this elephant by developing a working definition of authenticity. And so that definition is, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be, and embracing who we are. If we want friends, we must be friendly. If we want authentic friends, we must become authentic ourselves. Refuse the fear, shun the shame, forgo the guilt. Do you, be you. No one else can but you. All right. And here is our ending prayer. Authentic Spirit, strengthen me to be exactly, authentically, unashamedly, unapologetically who you created me to be. Amen. So, being unapologetically our authentic selves, that is an appropriate segue, I think, to what we're going to talk about a little today. There is no getting around or avoiding what day today is, here in the United States at least. I know there are a few people who watch us from out of the country who are not in America. And by the way, Gary and Cheryl Hayes, thank you so much if you're watching for the little teas you left me after the conference. I received them from my brother, and I have not had the opportunity yet to send you a proper thank you note, but thank you so much for thinking of me. I love anything miniature and all things British, so that was a perfect gift for me. All right, so let's take a deep breath in and say our connection affirmation. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. Okay, so today, as I just mentioned, of course, is Election Day in America. And I don't think I'm overstating things to say that more people than ever seem to be heavily emotionally invested in this particular election. The political climate here has become increasingly polarized over the last decade or so. And if you watch the news, which I rarely do anymore, admittedly, you could come away thinking that we are more divided as a nation than we have ever been. That's what everybody's saying, right? That's all you're hearing on the news. But let's go back to that was what President Obama was saying in 2008. Does anyone else remember his Yes We Can speech? It's one of my favorite political speeches ever. Very inspiring, very well delivered. And one of the lines that stood out to me was, "We are not as divided as our politics suggest." So this is really not something new. We've been dealing with this for a while now. It just seems to have been ramping up. And then he went on in that speech to talk about the fact that there are no red states, there are no blue states, but that we are the United States, and everybody cheered. And then nobody seemed to act like it after he got elected. So a man named will.i.am, even wrote a song and put this speech, the words of that speech, to music. And a refrain that was repeated over and over in that song was, "We want change, we want change, we want change." And it seems to me that no matter which party or individual is in office, there's always a group of people somewhere who, whether they are large or small, are always very loudly calling for change. It's a little like a famous quote from one of our very first presidents. "You can fool all of the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time." Now, far be it from me to try to improve upon the great Abraham Lincoln, but maybe I'll just adjust it a little for my purposes today by replacing the word fool with the word please. So no matter who's in charge, there's always a group of people somewhere who isn't happy with the way things are going and with how decisions are being made. So I'm going to say you can please all of the people some of the time and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot please all of the people all of the time. And that's why it's a good thing and something that we should all be grateful for, that here in America, we've been given the right to go to the polls every few years and be our authentic selves and vote our conscience, presumably without any negative ramifications. Years ago, before the advent of the internet and social media, it was much easier, I think, to just go and vote for whoever you thought aligned best with your values and who you thought would do the best job, and go on about your business. I was taught growing up that in polite society, there are a couple of things you shouldn't bring up in certain settings if you want things to remain polite, and one of those things was politics. But that now seems like advice from a long-forgotten, bygone era in America. And I think we have successfully now replaced baseball with fighting about politics as our national pastime. And it's okay to be passionate about politics and causes and people and leaders who you believe in. But as always, there is a middle way to be found, which is seemingly elusive to a lot of us right now. And we shouldn't let our passion or what we believe in turn us into crazy people who, as my good friends from the UK say, have completely lost the run of ourselves. Okay, we need to remember. See my shirt? I wore this on purpose today. So, yes, John did too. So the ideal, the goal in a functioning democracy is for all of us to be able to vote for whomever we choose, for whomever we believe in, as I said, the candidate that we think will do the best job without the fear of being ostracized by those of our friends and family who vote differently and feel differently than we do. But unfortunately, that is becoming increasingly rare, and we seem to be forcing ourselves into these silos and echo chambers with only people who think exactly like we do. And this whole us versus them paradigm is becoming normalized more and more. But wouldn't it be great if that were not the case? Wouldn't it be great if we could see that we really are more than our beliefs, whether those beliefs are religious or political? Wouldn't it be great if we could truly understand that inclusion applies to everything in life, not just religion? Wouldn't that be fantastic? And most importantly, wouldn't it be great if we could remember that no government, no matter who is in charge of it at the moment, is our source? That is the main message of comfort I want to bring to you today, no matter what happens today. You know, I love what Reverend Dr. Sharonda, and you know what? I've just given her a new title because she's a doctor and she's also a pastor, but pastor doctor sounds kind of dumb. So I'm going to go ahead and dub her with the title Reverend Dr. Sharonda, just like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. So on Sunday, Reverend Dr. Sharonda said in her prayer, no matter what the outcome of the election is, we've all got to find our fine, because we're all going to be fine no matter what. It's times like right now, like today, and later on tonight, when no matter who wins, there are going to be a lot of people upset and bent out of shape. Okay, and that's when we need to remember and lean on our faith the very most. We like to call ourselves people of faith, but are we really? Do we really believe that? If you've ever uttered the phrase or entertained the thought, if so-and-so, fill in the blank, wins, it will be the end of democracy, or the country is doomed, or something like that. If you've ever said or thought that, then you might want to rethink your faith and what it is truly in, or who it is truly in. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to have to ask for your patience today, and maybe even for your forgiveness in advance, because what I have to say is probably not going to be in the warm and fuzzy feel-good category. I might even do a little admonishing, because I am absolutely exhausted by and disgusted with so many people on both sides of the aisle, as it were, who claim to be people of faith, wringing their hands over the prospect of their candidate might lose and what that would mean. I'm just over it. Putting that kind of faith in one candidate or in a specific political party is the same exact thing that we talk about all the time here as putting all of your faith in a pastor or in one particular religion, instead of believing, as we do, that, ultimately the source of everything is, God. we forget that sometimes. And it's like, I don't care what happens here. I mean, I do care, and I'm going to do everything I can to help what I want to happen. But in the end, that is not my source. God is my source, and the Christ within me is my source. So, seems a lot of us have forgotten who our source is and in what or whom our faith should be. We talk a really good game about having faith and what it is that we believe in, but I think we've also forgotten what we need faith for in the first place. I've said this before many times. When we need our faith the most is during times that are difficult, because let's face it, when everything's going well, when everything's great and going along the way we want it to, we don't really need faith. Coming to church, believing in a higher power, practicing other aspects of our faith might be enjoyable, and it's certainly beneficial to us all the time. But when we really need our faith, when we rely on it, is when we are having to face a storm, when things are not going well. So to illustrate this, I want to tell you a story, and I've told it to you before, about an actual storm. We probably need a little comic relief right about now anyway, and part of this story is funny. So one night a few years ago, I went to bed around 11 o'clock, and I was sound asleep when my phone went off about 2:45 a.m. And it was Pastor Brandy, my sister-in-law, asking if I was up monitoring the news because there were some tornadoes that had touched down and were apparently headed our way, and she was concerned about us. So I got up and turned on the television, and sure enough, the weatherman was saying at that very moment, if you're in the Stone Mountain or Redan area of DeKalb County, don't wait. Go and get into the lowest part of your house immediately. So I headed upstairs where Mom and Dad's rooms are, and as often is the case, in the middle of the night at our house, the lights were still on. All the lights were still on. Both TVs were blaring. Not the news, though. My mom, I think, was watching old videos of some of our previous church productions, as she does a lot. And the kind of funny part is when I opened her door at 2:45 a.m., she just said, "Hey, like, come on in, sit down and watch this with me." Not, "What's wrong? Why are you bursting through my door without knocking it in the middle of the night?" It was like just the most normal thing in the world to her that I would just open her door at 2:45 and want to come in. So my house has never been normal. That's really not an issue. So I get her and Daddy down to the basement where my son and his wife live, and then I was headed back up to the middle level to try to wake my husband up, which is another story. He is such a heavy, heavy sleeper. He actually slept through a tree falling on our house one time. So I knew that was going to be an issue. But right before I got back up the stairs, I got another text from Brandy, and she said, "Crazy, they just said it lifted up," talking about the tornado. And sure enough, just as I got back to the TV, they were saying that this tornado that had actually been spotted on the ground just minutes before had somehow dissipated and gone back up into the atmosphere, and that they were downgrading the warning back to just a watch. So we all went back to bed, and thankfully all was well, excitement over. But the point of my telling you that story is, after the fact, I was noticing that although I was concerned, and rightly so, and I felt the urgency to move quickly once I heard the newsman say, "Don't wait, get to a safe place now," I never felt fear. I never went into a panic. And so it's during times like that, it's during a storm, that we see exactly how strong our faith that we like to talk about so much actually is. All right. So I did a whole series a while back on our chakra system. Some of you might remember it. And the first chakra that we talked about was our root chakra, which is related to our survival. And it enables us to use our personal power to create our own security in life so that we see the world as a safe and enjoyable place. Now, all of these political ads from both sides that have been running incessantly on a loop for at least this last 6 months are all preying on our fear. Each side is trying to make us think that we'll not only be safer and more protected with them, but that if the other side wins, we're all going to die. Okay, it's literally gotten to that much hyperbole. So both sides are attacking us at that level of our root chakra by promising us safety with them and certain death if we oppose them. And I am absolutely shocked that so many so-called people of faith are buying into that. And so I'm going to read you a story now about a man who had every reason in the world to feel like the world was not a safe and loving place for him. He had every reason to be filled with fear, but he made a decision to have faith instead. And this is a story I've read you before, but it still amazes me every time I read it and think about this man. It says, in September of 1942, a young doctor, his new bride, his mother, father, and brother were all arrested in Vienna and taken to a concentration camp in Bohemia. It was events that occurred there and at 3 other camps that led the young doctor, known only as prisoner 119104, to realize the significance of the meaningfulness in life. One of the earliest events to drive home the point was the loss of a manuscript, his life's work, during his transfer from one prison camp to another. He had sewn it into the lining of his coat, but was forced to discard it at the last minute. He spent many later nights trying to reconstruct it, first in his mind, then on slips of stolen paper. The young doctor's name was Viktor Frankl. When he was moved to Auschwitz, his manuscript that he had rewritten was discovered and destroyed. His desire to complete his work and the hope that he would be reunited with his wife and family someday kept him from losing hope in what seemed an otherwise hopeless situation. After moves to 2 more camps, he succumbed to, but survived, typhoid fever. In April of 1945, Frankl's camp was liberated, and he returned to Vienna only to discover the deaths of his loved ones. Although physically weak, emotionally broken, and very much alone in the world, he was given the position of director of the Vienna Neurological Polyclinic, where he wrote prolifically and helped hundreds of patients over the next 25 years. All right, so who's heard that story before about Viktor Frankl? Okay, so let's look at this man's reality. This story obviously took place during World War II and the Holocaust, and he and his whole family were arrested and imprisoned simply because they were Jewish. Number one, he had broken no law, committed no crime, was an upstanding citizen, a doctor, yet he and his whole family were arrested and detained in a prison camp where he was subsequently separated from his entire family. Number two, he managed to sew a manuscript of a book that was his life's work into the lining of a coat. So he thought that at least if he were imprisoned, he could continue to work on the book that he had poured his life into, but at the last minute, he had to leave the coat behind. Number three, he reconstructs most of the book that he's already written once on stolen bits of paper while in the prison camp, but when he is moved to another camp, they find it and destroy it. So now he has lost his life's work twice. Number four, he becomes gravely ill with typhoid fever, but he recovers and is liberated at the end of the war, only to return home to find he is the only one of his family members who has survived. Yet he then has a long career helping others and is probably known for this, his most famous quote. He says, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." So there are stories of him in these prison camps being polite to the guards, to the people who are, to his captors, and sincerely thanking them for even the smallest piece of rotten food or dirty water that they would bring him. He would always say thank you to them. So how can it be possible that this man, after all that had happened to him, that he in no way deserved, was still able to find beauty and joy in life and to help others and to view the world as a happy, secure, enjoyable place? The simple answer is he decided to. So, there's been so much talk during this election cycle about certain of our rights being taken away. Some people are worried about abortion rights. Other people are worried about gun rights. But I don't think any of us can truly understand the extent to which this man's rights were totally and completely taken away from him. And yet, he still made the choice to remain positive. Okay, so now we're going to go to the book Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle says, no matter what happens, no matter how much your life changes, one thing is certain, it's always now. Since there is no escape from now, why not welcome it? Become friendly with it. The present moment is as it is, always. Can you let it be? So that sounds like a good life philosophy, and it might be easy to say when we're talking about maybe losing a job or going through a divorce or not getting something you really want, which are all devastating things. But what about an experience like Viktor Frankl's? What about having every liberty imaginable taken away from you, being separated from your home, your career, and everyone you love in one fell swoop? What would your natural reaction be to something like that? I think many of us would answer that our most natural human reaction when we are placed in circumstances that we don't like or that we are not comfortable with is to get ourselves out of it. Okay, that's the natural human reaction. I don't want to be here. I need to get myself out of it. So there are several different ways humans go about this. Number one, our first instinct for some people is to fight, whether it's physical, psychological, legal, whatever arena we have at our disposal, we can use to overpower the people that have put us there. Or as children do, which some of us never grow past being a child, you just yell louder and longer than anyone else until you win. Or if it's a fight over an item, the winner is just the person who hangs on to it the longest. So let's go back to Viktor Frankl. In his case, was it even possible for him to physically overpower trained military guards carrying guns? No, it wasn't. And very often, the situations we find ourselves in are not ones that can be fought or won tangibly. So what's another way we fight? Sometimes we wage an inner fight and move it to the realm of our thoughts, or we spew stuff online to people that we don't have to back up because we're not talking to them face to face. So here's another quote from the book Stillness Speaks. When you're in a situation you don't want to be in, saying, I don't want to be here is not only useful, only useless. It's useless to say I don't want to be here. It's also dysfunctional. It only makes you and others unhappy. Can you feel how painful it is to internally stand in opposition to what is? Only when you recognize this can you be free to give up this futile conflict, this inner state of war. Okay, so how much good would it have done Viktor Frankl to sit in that concentration camp day after day saying, I don't want to be here. Why did this happen to me? I don't deserve this. I wish things were different. It would have done him no good at all. Him feeling those things and thinking those thoughts would not have changed his circumstance in the least, nor will it ever change any situation we find ourselves in. For example, waking up tomorrow to find that the person we voted for maybe didn't win. I really hope the person I voted for wins, but if not, God's still God, okay? Yet we find ourselves doing this all the time, and we can never be free of it until we realize that what is keeping us in the situation is our fighting it, okay? What we resist persists. Nothing ever goes away until it teaches us what we need to learn. So here's another strategy people of faith use to get out of or change a situation that they don't prefer. We just talked about fighting. Another tactic people turn to in this case is prayer. Okay, I'm glad you're here this morning, Pastor Gloria. A lot of these people will use the phrase, I'm just putting this in God's hands. But when we say that, do we really mean it? And exactly how is it that we do this? Well, usually we think, well, if we're praying about it, then that's putting it into God's hands. But what is our definition of prayer? This might sound surprising to you, but prayer, as most people would define it, is the ultimate attempt to control things yourself and the opposite of putting it in God's hands and letting Him have control. Now, why do I say this? Before I give you that answer, let's get some basic assumptions in place. If you believe that God is in control of everything all the time, as most spiritual claim to believe, then why do you feel the need to remind Him of things you need Him to do for you, or instruct Him on what the best outcome of a certain situation would be? And if you truly believe He loves you and is working all things for your good, then why would you think that anything comes into your life or any situation you find yourself in could be wrong or bad and something that He needs to change for you anyway? All right, here's a passage from a book called The Sacred Yes by Reverend Deborah Johnson. She says, when your prayers appear to be answered, it is not because God has come to your understanding, but because you have come to His. It is you who have changed your mind, not God. You never need to beg, beseech, plead, bargain, negotiate, or argue with God. All of this is unnecessary. When you run out of things to do yourself, Then you turn to God and complain about how he is doing things. Your attempt to influence God is simply your fear that he doesn't know what's going on or that he is too unconcerned, indifferent, or busy to be bothered. God has never forgotten anything. So why do you worry? What could God possibly want you to say yes to that is not for your own good? Okay, so I've said this before, but I don't like the phrase prayer changes things because I don't believe that's true. I think it needs to be prayer changes me to either accept things as they are or have the strength to change them myself. Okay, so prayer doesn't change God's mind about anything. He doesn't come down and do something for you. Prayer changes you to, like I said, either accept it for what it is or say, okay, there is something I can do about this, and God, give me the strength to do it myself. So the only thing that is totally in your control at all times is your attitude and how you decide to perceive things. Remember Viktor Frankl's quote, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." All right, let's go back one more time to that quote from Stillness Speaks. No matter what happens, no matter how much your life changes, one thing is certain. It's always now. Since there is no escape from now, why not welcome it? Become friendly with it. The present moment is as it is, always. Can you let it be? So what's the point? The point is there are always going to be circumstances beyond our control from which we cannot easily escape. And so we must find a way to deal with them. As Reverend Dr. Sharonda said, we must find our fine. The minute you label any circumstance in your life or in the world as bad, anytime you say, if XYZ happens, then this country is doomed or democracy is dead, at that point you've lost control. Or rather, you have taken control out of God's hands and put it back into your own, brought it back down into this realm. So let's back up to where this little section began. My question was, how do people of faith get out of or find peace within a situation that they don't like? Something they'd rather be a different way, or have something they would rather have had a different outcome. And my answer was, they pray. And then I went down a little side road of what people think prayer does, which is change things. But then I said what prayer actually does is change us to be able to accept the situation or to do something about it ourselves. Once again, back to Eckhart Tolle. I'm going to do it one more time to really drill this in your head. No matter what happens, no matter how much your life changes, one thing is certain, it is always now. Since there is no escape from now, why not welcome it? Become friendly with it. The present moment is as it is always. Can you let it be? And I just want to interject here that if Viktor Frankl could come to terms with his fate and accept everything he had to accept as a Holocaust survivor and remain positive, then I think all of us can survive the next 4 years, no matter who wins the election. Okay? Okay, I don't know how to do that little, what's that woman say? Oh, who was that? What's her name? Do you know what I'm talking about? I think I'm talking to the wrong crowd, but there's this rapper girl who, instead of saying okay, she always says, oh, okay. So I promise you that the sun is going to come up tomorrow and the next day and the next day after that, and we are going to have the same 24 hours that we have always had and the opportunity to make the best of it or not. That is our choice. My brother said something on Sunday. He said, is it working for you? That's been our theme this whole year. Is it producing righteousness, peace, and joy? That's how you judge how your life is going. That's how you determine what things you need to focus your energy and time on and what things you need to let go of. So let's think about this. Is arguing with people online and raising your blood pressure and watching the nightly news and staying glued to CNN 24/7 and complaining and acting like a victim really how you want to spend the next 4 years if the person you voted for happens to lose? Is it? It is definitely not how I want to spend my next 4 years, and I do not intend to. So shift happens. always. And we are never assured which way they're going to shift. And things may look one way and actually be another way. Or things may start out one way and shift to another way. So in my opinion, this is going to be the best way to handle it. Are you ready? So you remember when we were little in elementary school and we were being taught fire preparedness? How did we remember what to do in case we caught on fire? Stop, drop, and roll. Remember, that is blazoned into all of our minds. Stop, drop, and roll. So my version of that for the election and beyond is we're going to kneel, and then we're going to sit, and then we're going to stand. All right, so let me elaborate. A lot of people are trying to stand before they have knelt and before they have sat. So let's go back to the Bible. In Ephesians 6, it says, and having done all, stand. People want to hear the standing part, but they conveniently skip over the having done all part. So let's rewind to step 1, kneel. I talked a few minutes ago about prayer and how it's not meant to change God's mind about anything or to have him change something, some situation, so that it will be more to your liking. The purpose of prayer is to change you. But another definition that I like to use, or the way I like to look at it, is this. Prayer is us talking to God. But communication, as we know, is a two-way street. If you want to have a healthy, productive conversation, you can't be the one doing all the talking. At some point, you've got to stop and listen. And I like to think of prayer and meditation together as being the equivalent of a whole conversation. Prayer is when you talk to God, you can pour out your heart and say whatever you want to him. Meditation is then, when you're done with that, you shut up and listen. Or a more polite way, you just still your mind and then listen. If you just pray and say, God, blah, 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 and then walk away and then get up and walk away, it's exactly the same thing as talking to a human being and asking them a question, and then they're about to respond and you just turn around and walk away and you don't listen to what they're saying. So that's step 2, sit or meditate. The all part in having done all, stand, is kneeling in prayer and then sitting in meditation. Only after you've done both of these can you then stand. And in the case of what we're talking about today, part of the standing is going out and casting your vote. You can't expect to have a voice in democracy if you don't go and vote. And stand on whatever message your heart received when you prayed and then when you sat and listened. Go do that. So then you can say, okay, God, I have done all, and now I am truly putting it in your hands. And whatever the outcome is, I know I'm going to be fine because my trust and my faith is not in any political figure or party or human being. My trust and my faith are in you. And if I say I believe you are in control, then I need to really mean that when I say it. So no matter what things may look like to me or seem like in this moment, I believe you are in control. So there's one more thing I want to mention before I wrap this up. I remember back a few years ago when a horrible incident occurred. I don't remember where it happened exactly, but the situation was that a young African-American man and his girlfriend had been pulled over for a traffic violation. And for whatever reason, things escalated and the policeman shot and killed him right there in his car with his girlfriend in the passenger seat, and most tragically with her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat. And it was so sad and it was so senseless. I believe his name was Philando Castile. And I remember watching that and just being heartbroken. But around that same time, another tragedy that was involving children had occurred. And I remember a lot of people on Facebook were grieving about this incident. And again, I don't really remember what it was. I tried to look it up last night and I couldn't find anything. But I remember there was some other incident involving children that people were, putting as their Facebook profile pictures and all, remember so-and-so, these children. And these children happened to be white. So, what I don't remember all the details, like I said, but what I do remember is our very good dear friend, Bishop Paul Lanier, put up a post. And he said something to the effect of, I will know you're a true Christian when you grieve as much and care as much about the baby in the back seat as these other babies. And then he mentioned whatever that incident was. And so, this little girl had been in the back seat and watched a grown man, her mother's boyfriend, get shot right in front of her eyes, probably traumatized for life. But everybody's attention was on these other children, and nobody was even concerned about her. And he said, it really hit me. He said, I will know you're a true Christian when you grieve as much and care as much about this baby as you do these babies. So, the post was implying that being a Christian is when our care and our concern and our prayers are not only for people like us or people who we consider our own. The love of Jesus, Christian love, would never discriminate like that. And he wasn't really talking to his congregation, because his congregation has been racially integrated for years and years and years. But his wider point, I believe he was talking to the larger Facebook audience of people who consider themselves Christians, because there had been such an outpouring of grief for this one group, but then not any attention given to this other child. And so he was speaking mainly to Christians about racial equality and equity. But in the same way, I want to speak to you today, all of us who call ourselves inclusionists, about political equality and equity among our fellow human beings. And just as he said, I'll know you're a Christian when you have the same level of concern for children of all races, I will say, I'll know you truly believe in inclusion when you pray as sincerely for the candidate you did not vote for as you do for the one you did. So you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to vote for them. You don't have to want them to be in office or like their policies. But on a purely human level, can you just be kind and not add to the vitriol that has become so prevalent in our political climate today? And more importantly, can you accept whatever the outcome is and know that you're going to be fine and I'm going to be fine no matter what? I love something that I heard Robert F. Kennedy Jr. say. He said, we need to love our children more than we hate each other. And that's what it's all about anyway. What kind of example are we setting for the children of this nation with the behavior that we're exhibiting toward each other right now? We need to think about that. So I want to close today by reading a piece called A Message from the Universe. And the way that these messages, it's an email that I used to get from a man, I think his name is Mark Nepo, maybe. He wrote a whole book called Messages from the Universe. And if you were on his email list, he would send you an email every day with a different message from the universe. And it was set up like it was God or the universe speaking directly to you. So this is the message that I had written down one day years ago, but I think it's very timely, as well as a timeless message for all of humanity right now. He says, I can imagine that from your perspective, it must seem like some truly awful things are happening in the realm of time and space. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to weigh in. You live in a world of illusions, a world that springs from a much deeper and a far greater reality. And while at times the illusions are indeed ugly, with your physical senses, you see only the tip of the iceberg. If you could see the whole, you'd discover that the unpleasantness was only the tiniest piece of a most spectacular puzzle that was created with order, intelligence, and absolute love. You'd see that contrary to appearance in the grandest scheme of things, nothing is ever lost, no one is less, and setbacks are always temporary. And you'd understand that no matter what has happened, everyone lives again, everyone laughs again, and everyone loves again, even more richly than before. And in light of that, I would just like to end with this prayer. God, help us to say yes today to whatever you bring into our lives. Help us to surrender rather than resist what is. Help us remember that every human soul is included in your grace, in your love, and in your plan. We may play different roles, but they are all equally important. Help us maintain the ultimate freedom of choosing to respond in love instead of reacting from fear or anger. And as we often pray together, carry us where you will. Bring to us what you will. Take from us what you will. And awaken in us what you will. For we are truly surrendered to you. Amen. And so it is. All right, so we're going to kneel, then we're going to sit, and then we're going to stand. And know that we have the power to handle whatever comes our way. We are going to find our fine. Amen? Amen. So Miss Diane sent me a text on when she was she is not going to be here this morning, so Benny is going to help me sing our ending song if you want to stand with me.
Blessed always,
Blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Amen. I love you. Be at peace. We'll see you next week.